Welcome to Stories That Hurt. Here, we share stories that touch the heart, stories that invite you to pause, feel, and reflect. Addison's story, the morning of that Christmas, began unusually quietly. The snow, which had only occasionally brushed the asphalt the day before, had settled overnight in a soft layer on the narrow streets in front of the Sine family's house on Long Island. Addison woke up before his alarm. It had always been hard for him to sleep on days like that. Christmas wasn't just about presents or dinner. It was about that rare feeling of everyone being together. There was already light in the kitchen. His father stood by the window with a cup of coffee, staring thoughtfully into the yard. "Can't sleep either?" Addison smiled as he walked in, his bare feet touching the cool floor. "Someone's got to be on watch to greet Christmas," his father joked. "And someone's got to do the dishes," he added, nodding at the messy pile of plates left over from yesterday's preparations. "I'll do them." "Dad," Addison went to the sink without even waiting for a reply. "Before I leave." His father had wanted to remind him that ideally his son shouldn't have been working at all that day, but fell silent. He knew Addison's character. If someone asked for help, he simply couldn't say no. The night before, a colleague had texted him, "Eddie, I'm sorry, we've got a family situation. Can you cover my shift on Christmas?" No one else can. He had stared at the message for a long time, then simply replied, "Of course. Don't worry. You could have said no," his father remarked gently, watching his son scrub the plates with determination, as if it were something more than just a household chore. "I know," Addison shrugged. "But if I can make someone's life a little easier, why not? I'm fine. We'll still have time to celebrate." The house smelled of cinnamon, roasted meat, and fresh pastries. Every now and then, quiet laughter drifted in from the living room. Someone from the family was watching old home videos. Addison lingered for a moment in the doorway, watching his little sister flip through an old photo album and his mother straighten the last ornaments on the Christmas tree. It all seemed so steady, almost eternal. He caught his father's gaze. "You know," his father said, "I love that you're always the first to step up and help. But sometimes I wish you'd think about yourself too." "I do think about myself, Dad," Addison smiled. "It's just that, for me, thinking about myself also means thinking about others." He hugged his father briefly but tightly. "I'll be back soon," he said. "You won't even have time to miss me." Before he left, he glanced around the room one more time. His eyes lingered on the present he had bought in advance and placed under the tree for his father. Simple, but very personal. Inside was a watch with a small engraving. "For all the hours you've given us." He planned to give it to him that evening when he came back from his shift. The road to the CVS pharmacy was familiar down to every crack in the asphalt. The big neon sign, which always flickered slightly, seemed even brighter on Christmas Eve against the backdrop of the twilight settling over Long Island Dot inside. It was relatively quiet. A few customers. Someone picking up prescription medication. Someone else grabbing chocolate and a last-minute card. The usual on-duty atmosphere, slightly diluted by Christmas tunes playing on the radio. Addison greeted his coworkers, just a few phrases, but sincere. He always did that. Looked people in the eye, remembered small details, asked how they were not just out of politeness. "You were supposed to be home today," one of them said. "Thanks for covering." "Family's not going anywhere," he replied. "But you needed help today." For the first few hours, everything went as usual. He helped customers find cold medicine, picked out vitamins for an elderly woman who kept getting the names mixed up, patiently explained the difference between packages. His composure and genuine desire to help gave people who walked into the pharmacy a sense of safety. By the end of the day, the fatigue started to catch up with him, but he didn't complain. He kept thinking about what awaited him at home. A hot dinner, laughter, stories around the table. Maybe they'd still have time to watch some old Christmas movie together, like they did every year. What happened next burst into the routine, calm like a sharp gust of cold wind. Everything unfolded far too quickly. A man raised voices. A tension in the air you could almost feel on your skin. On the security cameras that the police later viewed, there were only fragments, outlines of figures, rapid movements, a few seconds in which everything was condensed. Fear. aggression, an attempt to stop something, or, on the contrary, to break free. What no lens managed to capture were the thoughts flashing through Addison's mind in those moments, and the instinctive urge to protect, which he had clearly lived with all his life. People who were nearby later said that he didn't raise his voice, that he tried to speak calmly and evenly, as if he had already done this more than once before, diffusing conflicts, steering things away from violence. He was the kind of person who was always ready to step in front of a bullet, as his father would later say. The knife, the flash of metal that in a single instant crossed out all plans, conversations, dreams. The frantic emergency call, the ambulance, the flickering of sirens against the backdrop of Christmas lights outside the pharmacy in the hospital corridor. The air was thick with tension. His father arrived, barely remembering the drive itself. It felt like his heart was beating in his throat, his footsteps echoing far too loudly. All he could think about was that morning. The plates in the sink, the phrase, "I'll do the dishes before I go to work." That brief kiss on the cheek by the door. Time stretched like rubber. 1 minute felt like an hour. When the doctor finally came out, his father understood everything before a single word was spoken. There is an expression on a face that you cannot mistake for anything else. In that moment, it was as if he fell into another reality where the world suddenly lost its sound. Were any other words spoken in the corridor, someone talking about tests, about the queue, about visiting hours became distant noise. He was a good kid, someone from the medical staff said quietly, not knowing how or with what to help a father who had just lost his son. The house greeted him with a silence louder than any scream. The dishes were still on the table, half covered with foil, as if the celebration had simply been paused for a few hours. The Christmas tree lights were blinking, mercilessly indifferent to human pain. Under the tree lay Addison's gift, wrapped with a slightly crooked ribbon. His father couldn't bring himself to touch it for a long time. Finally, he sat down on a chair and unwrapped the package, as if performing some sacred ritual. Inside was the watch. On the back cover, a small engraving. He ran his finger over the thin letters, reading them out loud in a whisper, as if addressing his son, who was no longer there. Then, for the first time that evening, he really cried, not in short, ragged breaths like in the hospital, but long and soundlessly, clutching the watch in his hand as if it were the only thing tying him to reality. In the days that followed, the door of their house almost never closed. Addison's friends came, distant relatives, neighbors, his co-workers from the pharmacy. Everyone said roughly the same thing. He was always smiling. He always asked if he could help somehow. He never refused, even when it was inconvenient. On the fundraising page created to support the father in his days of grief, people left short messages. Even those who had known Addison for only a few minutes at the pharmacy counter wrote, "He was very polite when he helped me find medicine for my son. There was a special kindness in his eyes. I hardly knew him, but I remember how he treated my elderly mother with incredible respect." In the evenings, when the house finally grew quiet, his father would read those words. It was as if he were discovering his son all over again, through the eyes of other people. In every memory, in every detail, he saw confirmation of what he had always known. Addison lived the way he had spoken that Christmas morning. If he can make someone's life better, he'll do it. The investigation continued. The news kept changing, but for the family, time seemed to have split into before and after. His father often recalled the words he repeated to journalists. He was the kind of person who would stand in front of a bullet for anyone. It wasn't just a figure of speech. There had been countless small examples in his life. He stood up for those who were bullied at school. He walked an elderly neighbor to the bus stop in the rain. He stayed late at work so a colleague could make it to their child's performance, and that feeling that he left this life, remaining true to himself until the very last second over time, became for his father not only a source of pain, but also a quiet source of pride, because the tragedy took his son, but it didn't take away the meaning of how he had lived his 23 years. Every year, as Christmas approaches, his father takes out that same watch. He winds it, listens to the steady ticking, and it seems to him that it is not only the passage of time, but also a reminder of all the hours Addison gave to other people. Dishes pile up in the kitchen again after cooking. The family now washes them together, not because it's more convenient, but because every time the water in the sink foams up. They remember his words from that morning, "I'll do the dishes before I go to work." And in that simple phrase, in its ordinariness, a whole life lives on, short, but filled with kindness right up to the very last day. A few days passed after Christmas. But for Addison, senior time seems stuck at that single point between the phrase, "I'll do the dishes and then go," and the call from the hospital. The house was filled with people. Condolences, warm words, and a cold emptiness that nothing could seal. Every evening when everyone left, he remained alone with his son's watch and the question that gnawed at him more and more, why? He caught himself at night replaying the events of that day over and over in his mind, even though he hadn't seen them. He invented details, intonations, pauses, until one thought finally sank its claws into him. Something doesn't add up. The first crack came in the form of a short conversation with one of his son's colleagues who had come to the wake. The young pharmacist sat on the edge of a chair, twisting his cap in his hands, unable to find a place for himself. "You're Eddie's father, right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," the man nodded. His voice still didn't quite obey him. He once saved my shift," the pharmacist began hastily. "I was running late, there was a terrible traffic jam, and he stayed an extra hour because he said he couldn't leave us with a line of customers. He was always like that." He fell silent, swallowed. "Listen," the pharmacist suddenly forced out, "I don't know if I should." "They told us not to talk until everything's cleared up." "Talk," his father said quietly but very firmly. The pharmacist glanced over his shoulder as if checking that no one was listening. "The cameras," he whispered. "That's the thing. They said there was video, but not all the cameras in our pharmacy were working properly. Some hadn't been fixed for months. And just yesterday, before it happened, the manager was yelling at someone on the phone, shouting about security expenses, and now everyone's pretending everything's under control. You think someone's hiding something?" His father felt a wave of anger rise in his chest, not yet shaped into words. "I don't know," the pharmacist answered honestly. "But I know one thing, Eddie wouldn't get into a fight for no reason. He always tried talking first. If there was more to it than a random attack, I wouldn't be surprised." At first, Addison Sr. tried to wave these thoughts away. "That's grief talking," he told himself. But the sleepless nights, the fragmented memories, the strange little details in the news reports, all of it was starting to look like more than just a tragedy. On the third day after the funeral, he took from his nightstand an old greeting card his son had once given him for Father's Day. On the back, in the clumsy handwriting of a teenager, it said, "If you're ever scared, remember that I'll always be there, even if I'm not there physically. And also, never give up when you feel like you're being lied to." It had been written long ago for a completely different reason. But now those words nailed him to the spot. Never give up when you feel like you're being lied to. For the first time in days of mourning, he felt something besides pain, a fierce, cold resolve. The first official contact with the system came in court, at a hearing for the accused. The courtroom was crowded. Journalists, front pages of newspapers, cameras. A low buzz of whispers. Addison Sr. sat in the second row and for the first time, saw the man accused of causing his son's death. A middle-aged man with a tired face, gray eyes that kept darting around the room, avoiding any specific pair of eyes. "So that's what you're like," the father thought. No monster from a nightmare, no demonic image, an ordinary, somewhat lost look. And somehow that only irritated him more. The prosecutor read out the circumstances. The defense attorney asked for leniency, saying something about circumstances, nervous breakdown, no direct intent. Each such word sounded like a spit in the face. When the judge called a recess, a woman in a strict suit, a representative of the company Addison had worked for, approached him. "Mr. Sine," she nodded politely. "I'm very sorry for your loss. We've done everything in our power to assist the investigation." "Everything in your power?" He felt an icy note appear in his voice. "You spent years cutting costs on cameras, on security guards, and now my son is just a tragic incident." She hesitated for a barely noticeable second, then quickly put her corporate mask back on. "I assure you we're fully cooperating with the police. If you have questions, you can file an official request." I already did, he snapped. And they told me that some of the recordings were damaged. How is that possible? At that exact hour, her gaze lingered for a fraction of a second, and he immediately noticed something flash in her eyes, fear. Not sympathy, not confusion, but fear. That's a question for the technical department, the woman said quickly. I'm not familiar with those details. And without giving him a chance to continue, she stepped aside. Joining a group of lawyers, that brief scene stayed in his memory, as clearly as the formal language of the court. They're afraid of something, he thought. And if they're afraid, that means there's something to find. That same evening, he found a white envelope with no return address in his mailbox. Inside was a single sheet, printed on a computer, unsigned. This wasn't supposed to happen to him. Take a closer look at the schedule for the 25th. He wasn't supposed to be there alone. Next to it was a printed copy of the staff schedule with employees' names marked. Next to Addison's name was a substitute note. Next to another name, a bold question mark, as if someone had hesitated whether to keep that name there or not. He read the note several times. He wasn't supposed to be there alone. The father repeated quietly. What does that mean? His phone rang sharply, almost alarmingly. The number on the screen wasn't in his contacts. Mr. Sine? A low voice asked without introducing himself. Throw that paper away. You don't want to get involved in this. It'll be safer that way. Who is this? He asked through clenched teeth. Someone who doesn't want you to end up like your son. The voice replied shortly and hung up. The father froze. For a few seconds, there was only the dull hum in his ears. Then, instead of doing as he was told, he carefully folded the sheet and put it in the same drawer where the watch lay. If they're trying to scare you, it means you're already on the right track, he had once told his son in a completely different situation. Now those words came back to him like a boomerang. He started with something simple. He went back to CVS. As a customer, the store where his son had died met him with the same neon sign. The same soft Christmas music still playing in the background as if nothing had happened. Only a small memorial corner by the entrance, with flowers, candles, and Addison's photo. Reminded that time doesn't heal everything, he walked between the aisles, peering at the ceiling. At the corners where small cameras were mounted. Excuse me, he said to a young cashier. Can you tell me, are all your cameras working? She flinched at the unexpected question. I don't know, sir. That's for the tech department. Why do you ask? Because my son died in this store, he replied calmly, almost coldly. And I'm being told that part of the footage is missing. She turned pale. I'm so sorry. I really don't know anything about the cameras, honestly. But she leaned in closer. A few weeks before that, we had thefts. Management promised to tighten security, but instead they cut security guard hours. Everyone was furious, especially the manager. And where is your manager now? He asked. On vacation, she answered with a bitter grimace. Perfect timing, isn't it? The details started to come together like a puzzle. The anonymous letter, the strange damaged recordings, sudden vacations, nervous corporate lawyers. It all could have been a coincidence. But the father no longer believed in such coincidences. At night, he dreamed of his son. Not as a little boy and not as a broken body in a hospital, but as he had been that last Christmas morning with wet hands over the sink, a light smile on his face and the phrase, "If I can make your life better, I'll do it." When he woke up, Addison Sr. made a decision that chilled him and gave him strength at the same time. He would go see the man sitting in jail for his son's murder. The meeting in the prison was like a cold shower. Metal doors, the sharp voices of guards, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something heavy, indistinct. The accused was brought into the visitation room. They sat down across from each other, separated by thick glass. The phone in his hand suddenly felt eerily light. "You know who I am?" The father asked, not looking away. "The boy's father," the man replied. His voice was hoarse, tired. "I saw you in court." For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. The father expected to feel hatred, the kind that would make him want to smash that glass with the man's face. But instead, he felt something else, emptiness, as if the real answer wasn't here. Why? He finally asked, "My son." He would have given you anything he could. He'd even fight for you to get a discount if you asked. Why the knife? The accused lowered his eyes. I'm not going to tell you what everyone wants to hear, he said slowly. Because no one wants to hear the truth. They want a simple story. A madman, an unstable guy, attacked for no reason. But you, he looked up. You didn't come here for that. Then what did I come here for? The father asked quietly. For the answer to why it was him, the man replied without a hint of irony. And I'll say this, he ended up in the wrong place, with the wrong people, at the wrong time. The store was a convenient spot. No security, broken cameras, and management more afraid of a scandal than of violence. He paused, then added, and he was unlucky enough to be the kind of person who can't walk away when something's wrong. They had another punching bag lined up. But your son ended up there instead. The father felt his skin go cold. Who are they? He asked. The accused smiled faintly. If I start dropping names, they'll find me in this very cell, only without a pulse, he replied calmly. You want the real truth? It's dirty. And the blame doesn't lie only with the one holding the knife, but also with those who've spent years creating conditions where it's easier to pull a knife than to get help. He leaned closer to the glass, asked, yourself, why did the lawyers start running faster? Then the detectives the moment your son died? Why did the manager go on vacation right now? Why are you getting threats from unknown voices instead of just being given an official explanation? Silence settled between them. You want me to believe you're a victim too? The father asked bitterly. No, the man cut him off. I made my choices and now I'm paying for them. But your son paid for other people's choices. And if you really want a sharper truth, know this. Some of the people laying flowers on his grave have spent years laying big, fat profits and cost optimizations on the backs of people like him. The father slowly put the phone down and stood up. His legs were barely holding him. At the door, he paused for a second, turned, and met the gaze of the man behind the glass. There was no plea for forgiveness in that look. But there was something else, a bitter, almost vicious irony of someone who had seen the system from the inside and realized how everything in it is interconnected. That night, the father stared at the watch, gripping it so tightly that his knuckles turned white. A sharper truth, he thought. It's not in a single knife. It's in dozens of offices where they decided my son's life was cheaper than a new security system. A thought came to his mind that frightened him and gave him strength at the same time. If they think I'll break from a few threats, then they knew my son even less than I did. He opened his laptop and, for the first time in days, didn't just read the news. He started writing. Letters to journalists, human rights advocates, other families who had once also lost loved ones in random. Attacks at stores and gas stations. His personal tragedy was slowly beginning to turn into something else, a fight.